Good evening, everyone. Welcome to the July 13th, 2021 meeting of the Council of the City of Lancaster. I invite all who would like to join me in rising for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. You may be seated. Oh. Mr. Harris, would you please call the roll of members?
Excuse me. Yes, Mr. President. Mr. Arroyo.
Here.
Ms. Beke.
Here.
Ms. Craig. Ms. Diaz.
Here.
Mr. Garcia Molina.
Here.
Mr. Soto. And President Smith-Waddell.
Here. Councilors Craig and Soto are excused this evening. That brings us to the approval of the minutes for the June 22nd meeting. I'll hear a motion.
Motion to approve.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Council comments on the minutes. Hearing none, Mr. Harris.
Mr. Arroyo.
Aye.
Ms. Beke.
Aye.
Ms. Diaz.
Aye.
Mr. Garcia Molina.
Aye.
And President Smith-Waddell.
Aye. Thank you. That brings us to proclamations, honors, awards, and resolutions of recognition. I have here that we are beginning with a mayoral proclamation recognizing Indie Retail Week. Mayor Sirachi.
Thank you, Council President. Maybe no more time than this. It's important to recognize our local retailers through Indie Retail Week, July the 16th through the 24th. And I want to just acknowledge that this has been a really difficult time for retailers in downtown Lancaster and elsewhere as well. And in speaking with downtown business owners over these last few months as we've been reopening, there has been a great deal of appreciation to the city of Lancaster and its residents for supporting our downtown businesses. And so this proclamation is both an acknowledgement of the work of our small business community and the unique nature of our small business community, as well as a continued call to action to use your dollars as locally as possible. So I'll briefly just recognize that July is National Independent Retailer Month, and this commercial and economic stronghold in the downtown as well as in our neighborhoods is really based on the dedication and spirit of our entrepreneurs and small business sector. And we have, whereas, a long history of independently owned retail that adds to the unique character of the city, attracts visitors, and ensures revenue is circulated back into our local economy. And I won't get into all the formalities of this, but it's just an opportunity for us to recognize local retail, and I appreciate having a few minutes to do so. Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor. I'll take a second. I see the crew from Farboco in the back, who are an excellent example of how independent small businesses show a level of attention and care and sort of custom appreciation for the needs and desires of their community and their consumers. So we appreciate it, y'all. Thanks. All right. That brings us to Council Resolution number 42, 2021, recognizing Parks and Recreation Month. Mr. Harris.
Yes, Mr. President. A resolution of the Council of the City of Lancaster recognizing July 2021 as Parks and Recreation Month in the City of Lancaster and recognizing the benefits provided by our parks and recreation programs throughout the year.
Motion to approve.
Second.
All right, we have a motion and a second, and I believe that we have a presentation from the Lancaster Recreation Commission to kick off the resolution. So we'll hear the presentation, and then afterwards we'll do council and public comments, and then we'll vote on the resolution if that's all right with everyone.
Do I just pull this forward to me or I leave it here?
You can just pull it towards you.
Okay, perfect. Thank you. All right, is that good? Perfect. All right. Well, good evening and thank you so much for having me here this evening. I'm Heather Degay and I'm the Executive Director of the Lancaster Rec. You can turn to the next slide, thank you. And next slide. So the Lancaster Recreation Commission, also known as Lancaster Rec. And just a quick question for you council members today. How many of you have taken part in Lancaster Rec programs at some point in your lives? Yay! That is fantastic to see. So I think one of the things that's really become apparent in the last year is just how important that parks and recreation are to our community here in Lancaster. Next slide, please. So before I get started today, I just wanted to say thank you to your dedication to our beautiful city. I appreciate your service to City Council and your hard work, especially Mr. Arroyo and Ms. Craig. They both serve on our commission board. I know that 2020 proved challenging for our city, and I just want to share my sincere appreciation for your continued dedication to helping people live healthy, active lives in our community. So really just want to share thank you. It's because of your hard work that we're able to do our programs. So I'm here to talk a little bit today about what our organization does and the services we provide at Lancaster Rec, and share a bit about how we provided services over the last year during the COVID-19 pandemic. And it's the perfect time because it is the National Recreation and Park Society's Parks and Recreation Month, celebrating all things parks and recreation. And I would be remiss if I didn't also say thank you to Stephen Campbell and his work and his department's work in Department of Public Works. Next slide. So Lancaster Rec is a long-standing agency serving the city of Lancaster and Lancaster Township and the School District of Lancaster. Our mission is to provide quality and affordable recreation and education programming to residents. We typically serve thousands of residents every year and focus on programs that focus on education, childcare, youth and adult sports, programs for seniors, and family programs and special events. We are a unique organization. We're an intergovernmental agency by the Lancaster Township, City, and School District, but we are a separate 501c3 nonprofit organization instead of being a branch of city services. So that really allows us to, in a very cost-effective and affordable way, provide recreation programs for the community. We take the city's investment of in-kind services and monetary donations and translate that into $4 million of services we provide to the community every year. Next slide. So just a bit of the history of our organization, and we do have a history book. If anyone's ever interested in this, I would be happy to give you a copy because it's the first 100 years of Lancaster Rec. It's very interesting. A lot of pictures. But in 1909, we were established, and Lancaster was one of the very first cities to celebrate public recreation. So I think we should be very proud of that. Next slide. And you'll see on this list here on the PowerPoint a list of the many individuals that helped create our organization. Individuals much like yourselves, community leaders that recognized that there was a need for public recreation and knew that especially children deserved a place to play. So they created us as the Lancaster Playground Association. Next slide. So what started as our summer playground programs has now transformed to dozens of programs for our community, and they would not be possible without the support of our community partners, our sponsors, and our donors. And you can see, I don't think I'm allowed anymore to have story time next to archery. It's a little bit different regulation-wise now. But again, that and many other really interesting photos of clay pigeon shooting and axe club and all types of things over our history. Next slide. So we have infants as young as 6 weeks old to seniors as old as over 100 in our programs. We really reach people, residents in our city through all phases of life. And so I'm just going to talk again a little bit about the programs that we have, that are some of them are listed there, and a little bit about what we did over the last year particularly. I'd love to make this kind of an annual thing where I just come in and update you guys on the different things that we're doing. Next slide. Our largest programs are our child care programs. We offer before and after school care in all the schools in the School District of Lancaster, and early childhood education programs. Our programs are all Keystone Star 4 programs, so it's an independent rating agency that rates our programs the highest you can achieve. And they're all licensed by Department of Human Services, which means they have strict requirements for child-to-staff ratios, qualifications of staff requirements, and the physical environment and location requirements as well, too. In a typical year, between 400 and 600 children take part in our programs. Next slide. So in response to COVID, when the School District of Lancaster went to virtual learning, we still provided care. For school-age children, we provided care every day from 8 a.m. to 4 p.m. at 8 of our regular 12 locations for working parents. Then we transitioned when they returned to the schools to provide before and after school care at 9 of our locations, and we're preparing hopefully to have all 12 locations for the upcoming school year. We also partner with the school district to provide lunch, breakfast, and snack every day. Next slide. We also operate 2 early childhood education programs, one at McCaskey High School for teen parents, and then one at our Lancaster Rec Center. We have 2 pre-K counts classrooms at our Lancaster Rec Center and 3 classrooms at our McCaskey Child Care Center that serve families with free preschool education. And again, in a typical year, we serve around 150 to 200 children in these programs. And so in the last year, we served around 50 children over the year with COVID with limited enrollments. Next slide. And then we continued additional safety practices in these programs too. So in both programs, children wore masks, we did temperature checks, we social distanced, which anyone that has toddlers know how difficult social distancing little ones can be, but we did our best and had a good year in both of those education programs. Next slide. In both of our programs, we regularly solicit feedback from parents. So these are just some quotes from our parents over the last year that really shared how thankful they were that we had our programs accessible for families. And then my favorite is the last one there of, it was an individual that her son wasn't speaking at age 3 when he came into our pre-K counts program, and now he has a full vocabulary and loves to socialize and speaks full sentences. So I think it just goes to show the impact to our local residents here that these programs have. Next slide. We also provide great community programs like our summer playground program in partnership with the City of Lancaster and Public Works, which actually serves as a large employer for the community. Many students and community members work at our summer camps or our summer programs over the summertime, and we offer opportunities for students as young as 14 to work as junior playground leaders for the playground program. Next slide. So those 4 summer camps and 6 summer playground programs we typically operate, these sites provide also a free lunch and snack to families through our summer feeding program. We actually feed up to 80,000 meals over the summer to both children in our programs and other community programs and summer camps in the city. Unfortunately, we couldn't open all 6 of our waiting pools due to staffing issues this summer, but we did open 3 of the largest pools for the 8-week program. Next slide. We also operate Conestoga Pines Pool each summer, which provides residents a unique opportunity for a lush green oasis within the city limits. We've operated Conestoga Pines much of the same way since the 1960s to offer a very classic summer camp experience. We had to reduce capacity in 2020, but we are operating now at full capacity as well. Next slide. For our youth sports programs, we work with the school district for our Future Red Tornado initiative, which focuses on providing opportunities for children with access to physical activity to address the inequities in youth sport programming for children with financial need. So many of these youth sports take place at city parks and at school district fields as well too. Next slide. This effort, in conjunction with our youth scholarship program, awards more than $50,000 every year in scholarships to subsidize our programs for families with financial need and provide recreational opportunities with health and wellness in our community. Next slide. We also partner with School District of Lancaster coaches and high school athletes for our sports clinics, which are low-cost $20 clinics that kids can have exposure and try a sport before too much investment in cost. Overall, we provide about 40 to 50 unique youth sport activities for children in our community every year. Next slide. We also provide community events and family programs like My Favorite Open Streets and also our Fall Family Fun Fest at Conestoga Pines Park and our other events like our Mom Son Fall Ball and our Daddy Daughter Dance. And we're always looking to add more community events as well too. Next slide. We also operate a senior center at our Fairview Avenue Rec Center. We have more than 400 seniors registered as part of our center, and we provide things like free transportation, free daily breakfast and lunch to seniors in our community with a partnership with Office of Aging. So over the last year, we worked, even though our centers had to close, we worked to make sure that those folks got meals and weekly check-in phone calls from us as well too. And then we have a lot of different programming for the seniors, like exercise classes, table games, special events, and music programs like learning to play the ukulele. Here they played the ukulele group played at one of the opening of the Barnstormers games 2 years ago. So we support the city's age-friendly City designation, we're working towards a goal to reach seniors and meet their unique needs. I see Lancaster Rec as a primary recreation resource for our community, for the older population, and we're always looking to expand our programming for that group. Next slide. Finally, COVID has had a significant impact on our budget over the past year. So in 2019, we created the newly formed Lancaster Rec Foundation to focus on fundraising efforts to really expand sustainability for our organization, so we can continue to provide these programs for the next 100 years. We know there's always a desire to add programming, so we want to be able to continue to serve Lancaster in unique and exciting ways. Next slide. The Lancaster Rec Foundation is also a 501c3 organization. Our goal is to raise $1 million over the next 5 years to ensure recreation programming will be here for generations to come. So if you want to know any more about the Lancaster Rec Foundation, you can always talk to me or my buddy AJ, who everyone knows as well too, as their Marketing Development Manager at Lancaster Rec. Next slide. So our job at Lancaster Rec is to operate programs to bring joy, enrichment, education, and entertainment to Lancaster City residents. We work to improve quality of life and bring enrichment to people's lives. We want to hear from you as our city council members, and you can just tell Jamie and he'll tell me, but what programs would you like to see? How can we improve in the future? What feedback do you have? How can we better serve residents and meet their needs? In the fall, I'll be doing a needs assessment to try and gain some of those answers, so any feedback you have is helpful. So thank you so much for having me today. Thank you for recognizing Parks and Rec in our community. If you have any feedback you want to share with me or any great memories of Lancaster Rec programs, always feel free to share. Thank you.
Thank you, Heather. I was actually just thinking, I was very much a latchkey kid, and so I spent a lot of time in the, I guess that's the first floor. I think of it as the second floor, but the ground floor lobby of the rec center waiting to be picked up. I have fond memories of doing Taekwondo, I think it was, in the basement. Yeah. Council comments and questions on the resolution or for Heather or AJ,
If I may, Council President?
please.
Just more of a comment than anything, but just wanted to thank Heather for her leadership, especially through a very tough year. And I think this is the first time seeing you in person since the beginning of the pandemic, so good to see you. But yeah, I've always appreciated the rec programs, even as a kid, participating in some of the programs that definitely kept me out of trouble. And it's always great to, serve as a board member. So thank you, and thank you to the team, AJ, for all the great work that you guys do.
Also, real quick, AJ, who's sitting next to you? Ryan. Hey, Ryan. Good to meet you.
Resident yet? Not yet.
Okay.
We're working.
All right.
If I may, I just want to second what everyone else has said. The year that you all have been through has been a difficult one, but I really appreciate the perseverance because this program, I grew up on Fairview Avenue, so definitely was a big part of my life up to this is where you got your cheap Hershey Park tickets. Yeah. So I'm just extremely grateful. One thing when you were asking about feedback or questions, so my nephew's on the spectrum. And we often have a difficult time finding programs that are adequate to support him. So is there any kind of programs that you all are doing around that area?
Yeah, Lancaster Rec used to run a program called Camp Sunshine, which was a summer camp for children with special needs. I understand we phased that out probably about 25 years ago when programs like Aaron's Acres kind of started to come to light and fill that very particular. But we do make accommodations for anyone. Recreation is for all, and so whatever way that we can include people into our programming, we really work to do that. Yeah.
I love to hear it. Thank you.
Thank you, Counselor. Are there any questions from the public on the resolution? Okay. Thank you all again. Hearing none, Mr. Harris.
Mr. Roya,
Aye.
Ms. Beke,
Aye.
Ms. Diaz,
Aye.
Mr. Garcia Molina,
Aye.
and President Smith Waddell.
Aye. It is now officially Parks and Recreation Month in the city of Lancaster.
Yay.
All right, that brings us to Council Resolution number 38, 2021. Mr. Harris?
A resolution of the Council of the City of Lancaster approving the appointment of John Bay as Chief of Police of the City of Lancaster.
Motion to approve.
Second.
All right, we have a motion and a second. Councilor Garcia Molina.
Thank you, Mr. President. I don't think there is much more to say about this, except the fact that very excited to see what Chief Bay brings to our community for the past, what is it, Mayor, now, 6, 7 months. He's definitely jumped right into the work, and the difference between him and his predecessor is like night and day, and it's something that's very welcomed by us in the community. So I'm really excited to see what he brings.
Thank you. Mayor, did you have anything?
Just to say that unfortunately Chief Bay could not be here this evening. We had hoped to have a swearing in this night, but it was not an evening that he and his family could all be here. And so we are planning to have a swearing in a ceremony on Monday, August the 2nd, and council will be receiving an invitation tomorrow morning. And the public is also welcome from 4 until 6 p.m. At the Ware Center. We'll open the building up at 4 o'clock, and then we'll have the swearing in at 4:30. But it's an opportunity to meet Chief Bay if you haven't already, and just have some fellowship as a community. Since coming out of COVID, it's really nice to see people again. So there'll be some light refreshments there as well, and I hope that all of council will be able to join.
So that was Monday, August 2nd, 4 p.m. to 6 p.m. at the Ware Center.
Correct.
Got it. Thank you. And yes, please do. I've, what has it been? 9 police chiefs since I was born? 7? Meh. Anyway, of the ones that I've met, I've never met a police chief who was so eager to meet any and every person in the city. So, are there council comments? From the public? Good evening, Mr. Dastra.
How'd you know it was me? I'm wearing a hat. See now, Tony Dastra, 700 block of New Holland Avenue. I also look forward to Chief Bay's swearing in. I just feel like it needs to be said that no one person can reform policing. So even though I look forward to Chief Bay's appointment, we as a city have work to do to make sure people feel comfortable approaching the police in all circumstances, and vice versa. The police feel comfortable approaching citizens. I personally experienced a situation this week where pepper gas was involved, and it made me stop and think, like, how are we policing, and whether or not we can do better even if the situation is tense. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Dastra. Other comments from the public? Hearing none, Mr. Harris.
Mr. Royo,
Aye.
Ms. Beke,
Aye.
Ms. Diaz,
Aye.
Mr. Garcia Molina,
Aye.
and President Smith-Waddell.
Aye. All right, that is the last hurdle. John Bay is the Chief of Police of the City of Lancaster. All right.
Almost the last hurdle.
Sorry, I chose the exact wrong moment to try to chew that mint. Forgive me. All right, y'all. Sorry. That brings us to our first public comment period, reserved for those persons who have contacted our wonderful city clerk ahead of the meeting to address council. Do we have any, Mr. Harris?
We do, Mr. President. We have one. Pam Craddock Lilith.
Ma'am?
Good evening.
Before you start, sorry. I should have done this at the top of the agenda item. The ground rules are just that we ask that you start with your name and the block of your residence. So for example, I reside on the 300 block of College Avenue, and generally restrain your comments to 3 minutes. Go ahead.
My name is Pam Craddock Lilith, and I live on the 10 block of North Pine Street. And in the early morning hours of June 28th, on a Monday morning, I wrote an op-ed for LMP, submitted it, and I was notified last Wednesday they were going to publish it, but it has yet to be in the paper. So I'm going to read it. The explosion ripped through the sultry late June night. 3 more followed in rapid succession. In the milliseconds between the explosions, dogs began to bark, babies began to cry, and lights flickered on in the crowded streets of row homes. It is summer in Lancaster City, the refugee capital of the world, where humans seek asylum from war-torn countries. My heart aches for them. My heart aches for the war veterans, the survivors of domestic violence, all triggered by the invasion night after night from the week before Memorial Day until the week after Labor Day, often until 2 or 3 in the morning. My poor rescue dog, who suffered unfathomable abuse, trembles in her thunder shirt as I arise to dose her with Xanax again. I think of the residents who have to go to work in the morning, the kids who have to attend summer school, and those without air conditioning. I dread the sleep deprivation that summer in the city brings. As a healthcare provider, I know the health hazards of sleep deprivation: hypertension, stroke, heart disease, obesity, diabetes, cancer, depression, and an increase in motor vehicle accidents. Recently, AARP ran an article in their newsletter about the health hazards of noise pollution, citing a recent study published in the journal Environmental Research. Researchers found that living in a noisy area increases the risk of severe stroke by 30%, while living in a quiet, green area can reduce it up to 25%. 6 years ago, I moved to this lovely city after residing in the county for the previous 18 years. I plan to live out my golden years here. I love Lancaster. I love its walkability, its diversity, the quaint shops and phenomenal restaurants. I love the culture here, and most of all, I love the people. I have lived in many states in my lifetime. I have lived in large cities, small towns, villages, and way out in the country. I love living in Lancaster most of all, except for the noise. Commercial-grade fireworks were legalized for sale to consumers in 2017, creating a downward spiral in the quality of life in the city. There are ordinances against firework use within 150 feet of buildings in the city, as well as after 10:30 at night. These are disregarded and rarely enforced. Some residents call law enforcement, but are informed that it is almost impossible to catch the culprits. Last year, several garages were ignited and burned from fireworks being discharged in the southwest area of the city. In 2016, the year before the sale of commercial-grade fireworks were legalized for consumer purchases, fireworks caused a fire that displaced a family of 8 in Lancaster. I have witnessed sparks flying into my yard and into the yards of my neighbors from fireworks set off behind our houses. What will it take to outlaw these commercial-grade fireworks sales to individuals? Clearly, destruction of property is not enough. Must we wait until someone is seriously injured or dies as a result of fireworks? I and others have complained on neighborhood social media sites. People who complain are often ridiculed and told to suck it up. This is what living in a city is like. I, for one, have lived in much larger cities than Lancaster, and I have never witnessed this scale of noise pollution night after night. When I visit my daughter in Brooklyn, New York during the summer, it is quieter than in Lancaster. We need to find a solution to this problem before many valued residents leave the city because of the poor quality of life caused by the noise pollution and its devastating effects. We should not be held hostage by the few who live here that have a total disregard for others. After I wrote this letter the following weekend, an 8-year-old child in New York died as a result of a fire from fireworks, and his brother was seriously injured with burns. You're welcome.
There we go. Thank you. So yeah, this is a thing that we feel a lot of frustration and consternation about. I know that counselors have spoken to one another and residents, not only about the fact that these commercial grade fireworks have been legalized in the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania, but in fact that we and other municipalities that surround us are preempted by state legislation from making their sale illegal within the city. And our legislature believes that the relatively paltry amount, I think 14 million, when compared to the size of their total annual budget that they get, is worth more than our collective peace of mind, safety, or indeed our ability to govern our own communities. And it is frankly unacceptable. I had a conversation recently with the mayor about some strategies that can be implemented to try to make enforcement a little more impactful, or just to make people aware that there is a presence of police and firefighters who are watching these things, and that these things are citable offenses within the city of Lancaster. So the night of July 4th, I think to my recollection, they started at 7 p.m. and I counted the last explosion at about 4:20 a.m. So that is an entire workday, if you will, of fireworks being set off. And I did not sleep at all that evening. So your comments are extremely well taken. I will leave it to the mayor if she has any comments on strategies that she'll be pursuing. But please, to the degree that you can, please join us in letting our state representatives, the entire Lancaster County delegation even, know how it is you feel about this. The prime sponsor, who is not a member of the county delegation, but of the law you mentioned, ma'am, making these fireworks legal for sale in Pennsylvania, when addressed by constituents, journalists, and fellow legislators about what could be done, and that this had created a problem, indeed said that people living in cities needed to get over it. So that is what we're dealing with here. Just to say that I believe that we all understand, and to provide a little context. Mayor?
That's Senator Yaw, Lycoming County, and I would welcome the opportunity to work with you to write a letter and to send a copy of your op-ed to Senator Yaw, as well as to the entire county delegation, and we can certainly help you with that. We have asked and are working through the Mayor's Association that I'm part of, called the Pennsylvania Municipal League, to come up with legislation. Our first request is to repeal the law of 2017. We have made zero traction in that effort. What we are now talking about is, if it cannot be repealed statewide, then we want to be able to ban it in our municipalities, because there is no legal or safe place within 150 feet that these fireworks can be utilized, and they should be precluded within the law. So while we continue to advocate, let's talk about what happened over July 4th. First of all, I would say there, but for the grace of God, do we go, and every other city, because there are other cities across Pennsylvania that have had a loss of life and significant loss of property. The fact that we didn't have any loss of life or significant loss of property, I count as a miracle on July the 4th. I will also say that our police department was totally overwhelmed and understaffed. We are now moving into a mandatory overtime procedures that will make sure that we have enough persons on the street. It will be very difficult to enforce, but if we cannot enforce, we are going to deter. We know where fireworks are being set off. People are calling and telling us, hundreds of people, in fact, are calling and telling us, and we need to have some kind of complement, either of police and or fire on the streets. Our challenge is literally person power, and we have to resolve that. And part of resolving that is the mandatory overtime. Short of that, we just need to continue to be vigilant about our own safety. It is the number one cause of wildfires. It is the number one cause of house fires. It is the number one cause of burns that that people have during the summer months is because of fireworks. These are very dangerous. They should be left to the professionals. And I live just 2 or 3 blocks from you, and I know what you heard because I heard it too.
And this was the week before the 4th.
Yes, yes. So this is just to say that I am beyond frustrated with the inaction in Harrisburg on something that is so specifically related to quality of life. Fireworks and speeding are like, why can't we get anything done about these 2 things? In the meantime, we're left to figure out how to deter and respond with no tools that are really available to us. So if there are other ideas related to deterrence, please let me know. We're racking our brains because while I will continue to advocate, I will also tell you that my expectations of any action in Harrisburg are incredibly low. And I just don't understand that. So please let us help you get your editorial out and to Senator Yaw and Senator Corman and Representative Cutler, as well as other members of the delegation here in Lancaster County. Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor. And thank you, ma'am. That brings us to reports requested by council. Do we have any, Mr. Harris?
We do not, Mr. President.
Thank you. So that brings us to reports of committees of council from the meeting held on July 6th. We'll begin with the Public Safety Committee. Councilor Garcia Molina.
Thank you, Mr. President. So the Public Safety Committee did meet. We had 2 agenda items. The first one, which we already spoke to, which is the appointment of Chief John Bay. And the second one would be Council Resolution number 39, 2021, which we'll have later on in the agenda, which is authorizing the application for the Burn Justice Assistance Grant. So really looking at crime prevention. And that would be all, Mr. President.
Thank you, Councilor. Thank you, Councilor. That brings us to the Public Works Committee, which will be reported on by Councilor Arroyo this evening.
Thank you, Mr. President. The Public Works Committee did meet last week. We discussed Administration Bill number 16, 2021, amending the Water Service Termination Ordinance to state that the city's procedures will follow the same requirements of the Public Utility Commission. Mr. Hopkins presented to council on the data showing city and non-city residents' delinquent amounts. Due to the moratorium on utility shutoffs for non-payment, no shutoffs have occurred since the beginning of the pandemic. There's also an emergency rental assistance program that is available for customers with delinquent utility bills. In addition, we discussed Administration Bill number 17, 2021, rescinding Ordinance number 1, 2020, and the COVID-19 related construction requirements. We discussed Administration Resolution number 36, 2021, authorizing an application for a multimodal program grant. Mr. Stephen Campbell presented to council that this application request will be for a $1.14 million grant to be used to complete the financing of construction for the South Water Street Pedestrian and Bicycle Boulevard. We discussed Administration Resolution number 40, 2021, authorizing an agreement with the Central Market Trust that allows the City Public Works Department to administer the work needed on behalf of the trust. The building currently needs a new slate roof shingles on the towers and repairs for the large market entry doors. And finally, we discussed Administration Resolution number 41, 2021, which converts the temporary COVID-19 outdoor dining permits to annual permits. And that concludes the Public Works Committee report. Council President.
Thank you, Councilor. I am actually going to hand it right back to you for the Economic Development Committee.
We did not, sorry, the Economic Development Committee did not meet last week.
Thank you, Councilor. That brings us to the Finance Committee. Councilor Bakay.
Thank you, Council President. The Finance Committee met on July 6th and discussed one item, which is Bill number 18, 2021, authorizing the refinancing of a 2015 banknote, 2011 bonds, and restructuring portions of the 2016 and 2019 bond issues. We were given a presentation from Patrick Hopkins and our bond counsel, Daryl Peck, which detailed how lower interest rates and restructured debt service would save the city in the short term, long term, and improve cash flow. The refinancing of the 2011 bond issue alone is expected to save the city about $6.5 million across all funds. The net savings of the restructuring of all of the debt is $4.2 million. This bill will come up for first reading later this evening. Additionally, Mr. President, as you're aware, the city is self-insured for workers' compensation costs. Every year, funds to pay workers' compensation claims are included in the individual department budgets, but those claims are paid from the administrative services budget. So each quarter, we shift money from the departments where those injured workers have made claims to the administrative service budget to cover the costs. For the second quarter of the year, the workers' comp claims were made by city police officers, firefighters, and public works parks workers. A total of $29,919.08 is being moved from those department budgets to administrative services. Because this money is moved between departments, this requires city council approval. So I therefore make a motion to approve the second quarter workers' compensation transfers totaling $29,919.08 as proposed.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Council comments on the legislative transfers. Hearing none, Mr. Harris?
Mr. Royo,
Aye.
Ms. Beque,
Aye.
Ms. Diaz,
Aye.
Mr. Garcia Molina,
Aye.
and President Smith-Waddell.
Aye.
That concludes my report, Mr. President.
Thank you, Councilor Beque. That brings us to the Community Planning Committee, and I will be reporting for Councilor Craig this evening. The Community Planning Committee did meet on July 6th and addressed two items. The first was Administration Resolution Number 35, 2021, which authorized transfer of 607 and 609 Rockland Street to the city's redevelopment authority for reuse and redevelopment as affordable housing. And Administration Resolution Number 37, 2021, which would amend the city sewer control plan for the LGH Hankin project. This is at the former YMCA site on North Queen Street, and both of those should. Both of those were moved to the agenda for council consideration at this meeting, which concludes the report of the Community Planning Committee. That takes us to the Personnel Committee. Councilor Diaz.
Yes, President. The Personnel Committee met July 6th and reviewed the nomination for Jesse Purdy to the Human Relations Commission. Ms. Purdy's term will be from August 1st as this year to August 30th, 2022. So at this time, I'd like to make a motion for Ms. Purdy's appointment to be approved.
So moved.
All right, we have a motion and a second. Council comments on the appointment from the public? Hearing none, Mr. Harris.
Mr. Royo,
Aye.
Ms. Beque,
Aye.
Ms. Diaz,
Aye.
Mr. Garcia Molina,
Aye.
and President Smith-Waddell.
Aye.
And that concludes the Personnel Committee.
Thank you, Councilor Diaz. That brings us into our legislative agenda, beginning with items from the Historic District. Mr. Harris.
Yes, Mr. President. Considering the following application and recommendation from the Historical Commission for an improvement to a property within the Heritage Conservation District. David and Julie Byler, owners of 101 Coral Street, proposed construction of a second floor frame addition to a one-story rear wing facing First Street. And that application was recommended for approval by the Historical Commission.
Thank you. I'll hear a motion.
Motion to approve?
Second.
We have a motion and a second on the Historical Architecture Review Board recommendation. Council comments? No worries. From the public? Oh, yep. And Mr. Smith.
Good evening, councilors. Good evening, Mayor. Just wanted to inform you that Suzanne Stallings brought to my attention that this is a recommendation from the Historical Commission and not from the HARB.
Aha, thank you.
Other than that, I have no comments. It was a unanimous recommendation.
Is there any procedural change that needs to be made based on that?
The corrected agenda is behind you. I'm sorry.
No? Well,
That
then-
error is mine.
Okay, then in that case, but we can treat it as though there's been a motion and a second on the.
Yes.
Okay, great. Any comments from the public in that case? Hearing none. Mr. Harris.
Mr. Arroyo.
Aye.
Ms. Beke.
Aye.
Ms. Diaz.
Aye.
Mr. Garcia Molina.
Aye.
And President Smith Waddell.
Aye. Thank you. That brings us to ordinances for first reading. We begin with Administration Bill Number 14, 2021. Mr. Harris?
Yes, Mr. President. An ordinance of the City Council of the City of Lancaster, amending Chapter 55 of the Code of the City of Lancaster, Officers and Employees, Article 5, Mayor, Section 5521, Compensation, providing for the repeal of inconsistent ordinances, providing for the severability of the ordinance, and providing that the ordinance shall take effect in accordance with the laws of the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania. The first reading, Mr. President.
Thank you.
Motion to approve? Oh, just kidding.
Sorry, I'm totally, yep, that's going to happen to me every time I think forever. All right, so do we have any council comments on the ordinance, or is there anyone from staff that would like to comment on the proposed ordinance?
I'll make this very brief because I made a lengthy presentation at the committee meetings last week. But the gist of this ordinance is that typically when the salary for the office of the mayor has been changed, it's been changed in 4-year increments. If there is not an ordinance adopted in our read and interpretation of state law by, actually by the end of this month, or sometime early in August, the office of the mayor salary is frozen for the next 4-year period. So the ordinance that we brought in front of you, what it does is actually changes around the process for the establishing the salary for the office of the mayor, not doing it in a four-year increment, but actually setting up a process to do it in perpetuity unless council makes a change in some later year. And the process was, as laid out in the ordinance, is that the office of the mayor's salary would be frozen in 2022, so it would be the same as the salary set in 2021. And each year thereafter, the salary would increase by the same amount that state legislators and other officers within the state government changes, and that's set up by state law to change by the consumer price index increase in the quad state area, which is Pennsylvania, New Jersey, Delaware, and Maryland. That increase is published in the Pennsylvania Bulletin each October or November, which times well with our budget process so that we would have that publication in the Pennsylvania Bulletin sometime in October or November and be able to incorporate whatever increase there may be. And that increase could be zero if there is no increase in the consumer price index. So that would be set then in the following year's budget. The other thing to note is that from time to time, and this has happened several times since this compensation law was put in at the state level in 1995, that the legislature freezes the salaries of the legislators and other officers within state government, including the governor and others. They did that in 2020 and froze their salaries for 2021. So from time to time, that may happen. And if that happens at the state level, the office of the mayor's salary would also be frozen here. Basically in recognition of that freeze for 2021 is why we have the salary frozen for 2022, essentially a year behind that action. Every year thereafter, either the CPI increase would go into effect for the office of the mayor, or again, if the legislature changes that at any time going forward, then and freezes that salary, the mayor's salary would also be frozen. And then, of course, because this is a local ordinance, if at some time in the future, city council decides to change the process for recognizing increases for office of the mayor, city council can go through another ordinance process to do that. The only caveat there is that any change in the compensation can't take place during the term of a mayor. It would only take place with the beginning of the next term of whoever the next mayor may be.
Thank you, Mr. Hopkins. While he's at the podium, councilors, do you have any questions for Mr. Hopkins? Thank you. Oh, sure.
Just to make sure, I guess before it sounded like it was going to happen in increments. So now what you're saying is we're going to follow through the state, the same will fall through with the mayor. Is that
Yes,
what you're saying?
yes, that's right. So the first ordinance that was introduced back in June had 1.5% increases just for each of the 4 years of the term. And so we made a modification to that ordinance when we brought it to the committee meetings last week.
I wasn't there, so thank you for clarifying.
Sure.
Thank you, Mr. Hopkins.
Sure.
Are there any comments from the public?
Tony Dasher, 700 Brock, New Holland Avenue. I only have a question. Could you clarify what you meant with like terms? It seemed like you were saying like the calculation is done every year, but it only changes once the next term would change, correct?
So the way the ordinance is written, again, the 2022 salary is the same as 2021. Each year thereafter, whatever that published CPI increase is what that's the salary level for the office of the mayor would increase by that amount. Typically, the ordinance has been set up as setting a defined salary for only a 4-year period, which would be the coming 4-year period of the next mayor. In this case, this changes the process for basically for forever until it is changed at the local level by action of city council, or if there's action by the state legislature to freeze salaries for a year or some period of years, that would also have an impact on the salary for the office of the mayor.
Mr. Hopkins? Oh, I'm sorry. Mr. Dastra? Please approach the podium. Yep.
Yeah.
You know the drill.
Yeah. So I guess I'm just trying to make sure. So you're saying that this does change every year then? Like okay. I was just making sure it wasn't like a hold until, you know what I mean, until a term would change over, like it saves that changes and then finally releases them. Do you get what I was confused about?
I think so.
Okay.
So this would allow for a change in the salary for office of the mayor after 2022, because 2022 is going to be the same as 2021. Every year thereafter, whatever that published CPI increase is, that's the increase that would apply to the coming year's salary for office of the mayor.
And then stay there. I think to clarify, Mr. Hopkins. Oh my God, why did I do that? That was very rude. I'm so sorry.
It's all good.
So, and maybe if I'm, the way I understood Mr. Dastra's question is so we are in 2021 now. There is a CPI increase that will occur from 2021 to 2022. The mayor's salary will be frozen until the end of 2022. So I think there's a question as to whether the 2023 salary would be reflective of the increase from 2021 to 2023 or 22 to 23?
From 2022 to 2023.
Okay.
So the first CPI increase that would be applied to the salary for office of the mayor would be in 2023, in addition to the frozen salary in 2022.
And it would just be that 1 year's increase.
Correct.
And then you mentioned that if the state legislature took action to freeze their salaries, it would similarly be frozen. With the ordinance that we have in front of us, if, say, the state legislature took leave of their senses and decided to give themselves like a...
I'm just going to bite my tongue on that one.
What senses they collectively have. But like, indeed, say they give themselves in 2024 5, a 6.7% increase. I'm just picking numbers now. What does that, where does the mayor's salary stand? Does it stay at the CPI or does it follow their action?
So if that very unusual thing would happen, I believe the way I've looked at, so the law that was passed last year that froze salaries, it is technically an amendment to that, and I can't remember the name of the statute, but it is technically an amendment to that. If they made an amendment to that state law that changed the salaries of the legislature and other officers within the state government, that ultimately would end up applying to salary for the office of the mayor in that given year.
Okay.
Now, I will say that when the legislature made that move in 2005, that didn't work out very well, and they reversed it in the following year. So that change would also, that type of a change would also impact the annual salary for this position.
Okay, good to know. Thank you. Are there other public comments?
I have a comment, if I may. So I think like the question or what we have before us isn't necessarily about the individual. To me, I think it's a question about equity. And so I think as a council body that is male majority as well, we have a responsibility to address like the gender wage gap, because the fact that we have a female mayor that is leading a team of executive leaders that are also male, that are making a lot more than her, as was made apparent during the last presentation, I think we have a responsibility to address that. Also, the fact that we are where we are now is because there was a male individual who had the capacity and the privilege to freeze their wages at the time. And also, as we look forward and want to be leading this kind of equity work, I am hopeful that the next mayor would be a person of color. And if we're setting up our own communities that are people of color for success, I think we also need to address the fact that we want that person to have a wage that is representative of the leadership that they bring to the table in comparison to other communities, and we're just not there. So I think that this issue before us is more about equity work in terms of where we stand as a city, and not so much about the individual who will be getting that raise. But I also think that the fact that the salary would be frozen responds well to the fact that we are addressing a pandemic, and so we are being cognizant of that issue as well.
Yes, and I thank administration staff for their consciousness of that issue. I'll say raising a public servant's salary is tenuous and it is often unpopular. And I think we've heard a lot of commentary that indeed, that indeed it is Lancastrians, our community, who are in desperate need of a raise. And the two things aren't mutually exclusive. Lancastrians absolutely need a raise, and the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania needs to raise the minimum wage for the hundreds of thousands and millions of people that would benefit from having a more secure hold on their homes and on their lives and the equity impacts of that thing. But we have the power to do equity here. And I share Councilor Garcia Molina's hope that the next mayor is indeed a person of color. And as the leader of this council, for as long as that lasts, I don't want this to send the message to that person that they are not worth what the string of white men who came before them are worth. But that'll be my final word on that matter. If there are no other council comments or comments from the public, going once, going twice, I will move us to our next agenda item. Thank you. Administration Bill number 16. Mr. Harris.
Yes, Mr. President. An ordinance of the City Council of the City of Lancaster amending Chapter 295 of the Code of the City of Lancaster, Water, Article 6, Billing and Administration, Section 295-44, Notice from Customer, and 295-49, Shutting Off Service, to provide notification from the customer to the utility at the Office of the Bureau of Water, and to provide for water shutoffs to be performed in conformity with the City of Lancaster's water utility tariff and Pennsylvania Public Utility Commission regulations, providing for the repeal of inconsistent ordinances, providing for the severability of the ordinance, and providing that the ordinance shall take effect in accordance with Pennsylvania law. The title, Mr. President.
Of all the things that Bernie says in a meeting, the title, Mr. President, is my favorite. Mr. Hopkins, could you just give us a brief review of what's in Bill number 16?
Sure. So the actual language of the bill, it's actually sort of a good, the equity discussion in the last bill is a good discussion here. So within the city code right now, the city water system and the sewer system, for that matter, operates both within the city borders and also outside of the city borders. The Public Utility Commission has purview over determining rates and determining the regulations and the process for collections for delinquent accounts outside of the city borders. City Council, through adopting ordinances that come within the city code, oversee that process along with the administration for customers who are inside the city of Lancaster. In working through a number of different processes through Treasury with assistance from our Public Utility Council, the Public Utility Commission Council, SEL, legal counsel, and in reviewing some of the issues that I reviewed at the committee meeting last week about the ERAP program, the Emergency Rental and Utility Assistance Program, funds that are available at the countywide for those who are delinquent or behind on rental payments, but also utility payments. We did a thorough review with our legal counsel to look at the service termination process, really the whole collection process for delinquent accounts for water and sewer and stormwater inside the city. What we determined there is that over the last several years, there have been changes to the PUC code as to how we can do the collection process and the notices that are required to be either mailed or posted at a property if there's, when a account is moving toward service termination for delinquency. The current city code says that if a account is delinquent more than 30 days, that all is required is a 5-day shut-off notice posted at the property, and then the water can be terminated. What we want to do and what we're proposing in this ordinance is to get rid of that language, which is not the process that we have used for many, many years. We've used an equitable process between inside and outside city customers, but so that we don't have to come back to you each time the Public Utility Commission code changes, this language takes care of that and basically lines up the delinquent notice and collection process consistent with whatever PUC code is in place at that time. So if the PUC changes a notice requirement for customers under their jurisdiction outside of the city, we would automatically have to change that process for customers inside of the city.
Thank you, Mr. Hopkins. Are there council comments or questions on the ordinance? Councilor Diaz.
How many notices do they normally send out before they shut the water off?
So the current process includes 3 mailed notices from an individual. Your account is late, you just haven't paid within the initial cycle. There are 2 additional mailed notices, and then the final one is posted on the property. There's what has changed in the PUC code is there are different notice requirements for what they call landlord ratepayers versus tenant ratepayers. There's a 37-day mailed notice required for property owners who rent. There's a 30-day notice for tenants in that property. There's then a 10-day notice mailed to the customer, whether they're a property owner or a tenant. And there's also I believe it's a 3-day notice at the property, physically posted at the property, again, for whether it's a property owner or a tenant, and then notice on the day of the service termination. And at each of those steps, one of the other things that's changed in the PUC code is when payment plans are required to be provided to customers. And so at each of those steps, there is a payment plan option up until the day of service termination.
And in regards to the language, is it all in English? Do you have that
They're
translated?
bilingual notices, both in the mailed notices and also what would be posted at the property. So English and Spanish.
Okay, and how about those that don't speak either or, and they have a different language that, because we do have an influx of migrants that speak different languages, I'm just curious how that's being
So
handled.
there are phone numbers of the city treasury office posted on, well, included on all of the mailings, and then also on the physical posting of the property. Thanks to the work of Milsey Carrasco and others in neighborhood engagement to incorporate the language access program, all the folks at Treasury office have access to that Proprio service that Milsey has distributed cards throughout the city. And that has, I believe, somewhere in the neighborhood of 50 or 60 different language options for customers who may call in who don't have either English or Spanish as their main language.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Councilor Diaz. Are there comments from the public? I will, because I want to address this as it was mentioned last week. Give me just a second. I'm going to find something just so I can speak it into the recording. So a concern that was raised last week was indeed with the cessation of what is essentially a utility shutoff moratorium and the eviction moratorium coming around the corner. What are people to do if they need assistance? And of course, the significant amount of money being distributed for rent and utility arrears by the Lancaster County Housing and Redevelopment Authorities was mentioned. And when I say significant, I mean there's $35 million and they've spent 2 to 3 of it, I believe. So there's still $32 million available for community members who have rent or utility, back rent or utilities, available, and it is indeed a lengthy application. But as has been publicized on the LCHRA, that is the Housing and Redevelopment Authority for the county's websites, there are a number of places that folks can go to get assistance with what, by HUD regulation, is a fairly intense application. And for anybody who happens to be watching along, those places include BASE at 447 South Prince Street, Brightside Opportunity Center, which has bilingual staff available, the Community Action Partnership on South Queen Street, which has bilingual staff available, Crispus Attucks on Howard Avenue, though I think most people are aware of the frontage onto South Duke Street, as well as Price Elementary, which has bilingual staff available. What is not listed here is that the Lancaster Public Library also provides computer access and assistance with these and a variety of other assistance applications. So there are 6 places available, 4 of which provide bilingual assistance for help with this application. Please, if you need it, take advantage of it. Again, tens of millions of dollars for exactly this purpose. I will then move us, having heard no additional public or council comments, I will then move us to Administration Bill number 17, 2021. Mr. Harris, if you would.
Yes, Mr. President. An ordinance of the City Council of the City of Lancaster terminating ordinance number 1, 2020, adopted by Council May 12, 2020, providing for the repeal of inconsistent ordinances, providing for the severability of the ordinance, and providing that the ordinance shall take effect in accordance with Pennsylvania law.
Thank you, Mr. Harris. Thank you, Mr. Harris. You are Mr. Harris. I don't know why I second-guessed myself. So this essentially, if everybody remembers back in 2020, with the onset of the pandemic, we changed our regulations around the proximity allowable on work sites, the procedures that needed to be taken, and the ways in which people could arrive and the numbers, et cetera, arrive at a given work site to try to provide a safe way for construction and contracting work to continue within the city of Lancaster. And this ordinance would essentially repeal those new regulations and bring us back to the status quo ante on construction regulations in the city of Lancaster. Is that correct? Yes. If there's any additional comments you'd like to make, please.
Yes, that is correct. The intention had been to recognize that when everything shut down at the end of March, early April of 2020, it affected all construction and many other services that were integral to the services that the city of Lancaster provides. So inspection services related to paving of streets, installation of utilities, the continuation of the East King Street, the West King Street firehouse, et cetera, all of that had come to a halt unless or until there were provisions that allowed our inspectors and any other city individuals to be able to visit those sites safely. It also, that ordinance at that time indicated what was necessary to keep contractors safe and members of the public safe as they needed to approach. As the state of emergency that brought that about has been withdrawn at the governor's level, and as the ordinance related to the COVID-19 virus and protection of health are no longer in place, nor are no longer needed necessary, it is no longer necessary to have that ordinance in place that takes care of our inspectors, et cetera. OSHA regulations and other construction service and safety regulations are the ones that will hold sway, and we deem them to be sufficient at this time to take care of the construction, inspection, and other construction-related services.
Are there any council comments or questions from the public? Okay. Thank you. That brings us to Administration Bill number 18, 2021. Mr. Harris.
Yes, Mr. President. An ordinance authorizing the incurrence of non-electoral debt of the City of Lancaster by the issuance of general obligation notes, Series A of 2021, in the principal amount of, and a federally taxable general obligation note, Series B of 2021, in the principal amount of, for the purpose of financing, 1, the current refunding of the city's outstanding general obligation bonds, Series of 2011, the 2011 bonds. 2, the current refunding of the city's outstanding general obligation note, Series of 2015, the 2015 note. 3, the partial current and advance refundings of the city's outstanding general obligation bonds, Series of 2016, the 2016 bonds. 4, the partial current and advance refundings of the city's outstanding general obligation bonds, Series of 2019, the 2019 bonds. And 5, paying issuance costs in connection with the 2021A notes and 2021B note, approving and authorizing the refunding and redemption of the bonds and a note to be refunded, stating the purposes of the refunding, stating the remaining estimated useful lives of the capital projects financed and refinanced by the 2021A notes and 2021B note at a private sale by invitation, authorizing the purchase of bond issuance for the 2021A notes, making a covenant for the payment of the debt service on the 2021A notes and the 2021B note, pledging the full faith, credit, and taxing power of this city in support of such 2021A notes and 2021B note, providing for the filing of required documents, providing for the appointment of a paying agents and sinking fund depositories for the 2021 A notes and 2021 B note, approving and filing of engineering reports with respect to self-liquidating debt, and authorizing execution, sale, and delivery thereof, and other necessary actions. The title, Mr. President.
Thank you, Mr. Harris. Councilor Bakay.
Thank you. So at our committee meeting, we were given an extremely thorough presentation on this refinancing and restructuring. I'm going to allow Mr. Hopkins just a few moments to give us the high notes of that. And just to say that I look forward to reading all of those filled in blanks that are yet to be filled in on this ordinance.
I'll try to make this a significantly less thorough review of this proposal. I also want to say I'm pretty sure it was the first refinancing we did that gave rise to the city clerk saying the title, Mr. President, at the end of the title, because these are always lengthy ones. So the proposal that we presented at the committee meetings last week was for a refinancing of the 2011 bonds and also a 2015 note. And those I sort of called a plain vanilla refinancing with interest rates still at historic lows. We can take advantage of those lower interest rates, refinance, and save several $1 million in interest payments over the life of the bond issues. The restructuring of the 2016 and 2019 bond issues is really to take advantage of moving the savings that we achieved through the 2001 and 2015 refinancing up into the earlier years of savings that are achievable. So the end result of the combination of the refinancing and the restructuring of those 4 different bond issues results in what we're estimating to be a savings of about $3.2 million, $3.1 million in the general fund between 2021 and 2022. About $3.9 million of savings in the first 2-year period, so 2021 and 2022 in the sewer fund, and then in the water fund, a savings of about $1,350,000 in 2021. That is somewhat balanced off, but not entirely, by an increase in the debt service in 2022. And that's really timed based on when we anticipate taking a water rate increase proposal to the Public Utility Commission for suburban customers of the city water system. And that would take effect at some point during 2022, which would raise the additional revenue needed to cover that increase in debt service. So all in, it's really a proposal to achieve significant interest savings in the general fund, the sewer fund, and the water fund, all of which need it. We talked at the committee meeting last week about the the deficits that we have budgeted in both the general fund and the water fund, and then more significantly in the sewer fund is the cash flow issue that we've had over a number of years. And the savings that we'll achieve across these 3 funds will not entirely wipe out those issues, but they'll tackle them to a great extent. The schedule for this ordinance that we have in front of us is the first reading, obviously, tonight. If we need additional discussion at the August 2nd Finance Committee meeting, we can certainly have that discussion then. We anticipate coming back for the second reading of the ordinance on August 24th, or potentially at the first meeting in September. Whichever one of those 2 meetings that we would bring back for the second reading, we would have the bond auction the morning of that meeting. So in the first instance, the morning of August 24th, we would have the bond auction. We would already have our bank note proposals in hand for the taxable portion, the Series B portion. Have the lovely motion for Councilor Bakay to read that includes filling in all the blanks in the ordinance that the city clerk.
Thank you very much, Mr. Hopkins. Just one other important point. I really appreciated during your presentation how you mentioned that by doing this restructuring, obviously there's some short-term gains, and there's also the long-term effects of that debt service for the city overall. You try to hold it at about 8%. And I appreciated that this didn't change that, which doesn't hurt our prospects for future borrowing. Is that correct?
Yes, that's right. So, and that percentage is, and we look at that percentage in the general funds, in the sewer fund and the water fund, which are far more capital intensive operations. There's the debt load within those two funds is a lot higher because of the capital investment that's required to maintain those systems. In the general fund, we've maintained that 8% or below. So that's the debt service for not relating to the pension obligation bonds, but all of our other debt service compared to the general fund budget has been at 8% or a little bit lower for at least the last decade. In the graph that we showed you of the years of debt service and the comparison between current and what we anticipate will be in place with this refinancing, we have a significant drop off of debt service from 2029 to 2030. And then after another 3-year period, another significant drop off. And that either allows for actual, real savings in those years of debt service, or it gives room for additional borrowings if there are additional capital investments that need to be made at that time without having an increase in the debt service.
Terrific. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you. Are there council comments on this?
Question, Mr. Patrick. In relations to the debt that we currently have and foreseeing what possibly would be an increase in taxes, where do we see ourselves, let's say, in 3 years? Are we looking at still having a minus for the future? I just kind of want to know more or less what your thoughts are.
So, each year when we introduce the budget to you, we include that 5-year projection. If the budget, the adopted budget for 2021 included a budgeted deficit of nearly $5 million. We have always sort of overachieved in terms of reducing that deficit. In 2020, the budgeted deficit was around $3 million, and we ended up reducing that to an actual deficit of somewhere around $280,000. So we've, and that took a lot of work and frankly, a lot of pain in terms of, we went through a furlough process and other things during 2020 due to the pandemic. When we look out in the coming years, our debt service in the general fund is level until 2029, absent the savings that we're talking about with this refinancing. I believe you'll hear some report from the mayor this evening about legislative activity that we have tried to get done to achieve, different ways of being able to finance city government operations. I don't have a crystal ball, but the reality is that if we don't have changes at the state level in how we are able to raise revenue to pay for the services that our residents demand and deserve, we've got a difficult financial road ahead. The only tool that the legislature gives us to raise additional revenue is real estate taxes. And nobody I know sitting up on that dais, and not myself, want to do anything with increasing real estate taxes. And so that gets you into, if there's no change at the state level, gets you into the discussion of, do we want to raise additional revenue, or do we want to reduce the level of service that we're able to provide because we want to cut expenses? And that's unfortunately been the position we've been in for many years and really many decades.
And at this time, we do not have anything, let's say, set aside that can help us just in case something occurs where we wind up with more debt.
Well, we do have we've got a $15.4 million reserve in the general fund as of the end of 2020. We have, used in a number of years, we have used that portions of that budgeted or that reserve to quote unquote balance the budget. So we've said we're going to take from reserves to balance the budget so that we're not increasing taxes. That was an active choice in the 2021 budget to propose a nearly $5 million use of reserves, so almost a third of that reserve, so that we weren't raising taxes in the middle of a pandemic. We have, the fact that we ended up 2020 with a much lower deficit than we budgeted for means that we still have a fair amount of those, well, we have nearly all those reserves still remaining. We are not looking at an increase in debt service in the general fund, at least in the next several years. We're fortunate that the American Rescue Plan Act was adopted at the national level. That will bring in dollars both into the city general fund and also allow us to make some capital expenditures using ARPA dollars, not general fund dollars.
And do we know roughly, and I know this is probably something you may not know, how many people are like retiring that we already are foreseeing like their retirement that they will get?
We have somewhere in the neighborhood of a quarter to a third of the police department is eligible to retire. So that means they've reached at least 20 years of service. It's a much smaller number when you get to having served 25 years of service, which means that they can retire at that moment and begin collecting a pension check right away. The numbers are not quite as high in the Fire Bureau, but they're still significant within the Fire Bureau. And we've seen quite a lot of turnover in both of those departments over the last several years. I think we have somewhere in the neighborhood of nearly half of the police department was hired since 2011. So we have a young police department and we have a fire department that's getting younger almost every day because of the turnover in positions. And then if you look at the non-uniformed positions that we have throughout the city, we're in the same position. We have a lot of people who have a lot of years of service in the city. Those retirements don't really impact they don't increase the cost in the general fund budget because we have pension dollars that we put away and minimum municipal obligations into the pension plans that we've made at 100% every year. It does ultimately end up freeing up dollars because new hires come in at lower salary rates. But turnover is a big issue, not just within this city government, but within them all around the state and really all around the country.
Thank you.
Sure.
Are there any other council comments or questions?
I have a question, Mr. President. This is kind of tangential, but when can we anticipate to have council conversations around the rescue plan and the funding?
No, go for it.
So they should, sorry, hold on. They should begin this month. The mayor and I have had some preliminary conversations, and the administration will engage a public process to look at the priorities and opportunities. As you likely know, a number of people and organizations and parties have already come with their recommendations about how that funding will be spent. And then post the discussions that have been engaged, or that will have been engaged with the public and with council, a final resolution on how funds will be spent will be presented to council. And from that point, we would be able to move forward with the expenditure of said funds. Mayor, did I miss any steps?
Just to say that on Monday, after weeks well, we've been waiting for the guidance on the guidance on the guidance. And so Patrick and Barry have been working through the legal, through the law and the guidance to understand what and how we can utilize those funds. So we have a preliminary document. We need to hone that into something that's a little bit more manageable and be able to share that with council and with the public as part of the engagement process. We're probably going to do several rounds of engagement because there's a lot of different priority areas. The first round is going to be generally, these are the things that we're thinking about in terms of our priority areas, and to solicit general feedback about the kinds of investments that residents would like to see, and then taking that the next step with each of the different areas and thinking about how do we want to appropriate those funds across categories. And I would say that in light of the report that I'm going to give a little bit later tonight. It is a situation where it is about putting our own oxygen mask on first, and also recognizing that by putting our oxygen mask on first, there will still be majority of the dollars available to the community.
Thank you.
Thank you. I can also share with you, and I guess with anybody who enjoys very dense reading, a copy of the interim final rule. It is, to my recollection, 39 pages. I was reading it at a diner this weekend. But it is actually, I think, revelatory of the context for which expenditures not only are open to us, but were prioritized in the passage of the rescue plan. So I'm happy to share that.
And if anybody would like the 35-page reporting guidance that's come out from U.S. Treasury, you're welcome to have that too.
Yes, and our first report is due August 31st.
Actually, just to follow Councilor Garcia Molina's line of questioning, the funds can be drawn down or expended until 2024, or have the timelines changed on that?
They have to be, the funds have to be obligated, meaning they have to be set aside for a specific project or program or purchase by December 31st of 2024. They have to be fully expended no later than December 31st of 2026.
Thank you.
Funds not expended get sent back to the U.S. Treasury.
We hate to do that. All right, I think we've drifted somewhat from the ordinance itself, but are there any other comments or questions? Okay. Thank you very much, all. And thank you, Mr. Hopkins. Okay, I believe that terminates our ordinances for first reading and brings us to administration, or brings us to resolutions, beginning with Administration Resolution Number 35, 2021. Mr. Harris?
A resolution of the City Council of the City of Lancaster, Pennsylvania, waiving the provisions of Chapter 232 of the Code of the City of Lancaster and also authorizing the transfer of the properties known as 607 and 609 Rockland Street to the Redevelopment Authority of the City of Lancaster to redevelop and/or sell the same for affordable housing purposes.
Motion to approve?
Second.
All right, we have a motion and a second. Mr. Smith or Mr. Hopkins, is this?
I just realized I should have just stayed up here. Mr. Delps is on vacation this week, so the resolution that's in front of you deals with 607 and 609 Rockland Street. As Mr. Delps reported at the meeting last week, the city actually purchased 607, 609, and 611 Rockland Street. And really, the main purpose of the purchase was to obtain 611 Rockland Street, which is a vacant property, for the purposes of providing a pedestrian access to Milburn Park, which is a great park, but it's set behind row houses on all four sides and is not all that visible. Lots of people don't know that it's there. And so the purchase of 611 Rockland Street will allow for that open access into the park. And there are planned renovations to the park coming up later this fall. The Kaboom project is going to happen with a new playground structure that's going to be built at the park. And there were some other, for those of you who may have been at the Southeast neighborhood meeting that we had there, there are some other redesign plans for the park and in the longer term, looking at both of those parking areas on either end of the park. So that's 611. The resolution itself is then transferring 609 and 607 to the Redevelopment Authority. The purpose here really is, in our purchase of the three properties, we sort of shortcutted the normal vacant and blighted taking process of the Redevelopment Authority. And so what we're doing here is proposing to transfer those two properties to the Redevelopment Authority. They would then go through the Redevelopment Authority's typical process for getting bid out to a developer or an individual who would rehabilitate the two properties, which have significant fire damage to them both, but are still structurally sound. they would get renovated, sold through the redevelopment authority process, either for homeowner occupied low-income housing or for rental occupied low-income housing through the regular process and policy that redevelopment authorities adopted for affordable housing.
Thank you, Mr. Hopkins. Ms. Geiser, Mr. Smith, is there any additional context we should have?
That's not why you guys are here, is it? Oh. Sorry about that.
No problem, you did great.
All right. Well, are there any council comments or questions for Ms. Geiser, Mr. Hopkins, or Mr. Smith? Comments from the public? Okay. Thank you, Mr. Hopkins. Hearing none, Mr. Harris.
Mr. Arroyo.
Aye.
Ms. Beke.
Aye.
Ms. Diaz.
Aye.
Mr. Garcia Molina.
Aye.
And President Smith-Waddell.
Aye. That brings us to Administration Resolution Number 36, 2021. Mr. Harris.
A resolution of the Council of the City of Lancaster requesting a multimodal transportation fund grant of $1.4 million from the Commonwealth Financing Authority to be used for the South Water Street Bicycle and Pedestrian Boulevard.
Motion to approve?
Second.
All right, we have a motion and a second. Mr. Campbell.
Yes, thank you again. This is the last phase of funding for a much larger project. This is the multimodal project of Water Street from Harrisburg Pike all the way down to Fairview, where we up till now have received $3.1 million from the state under the Transportation Improvement Program and the Smart Growth Transportation, which supports alternate transportation for pedestrian, bicycle, and other means of getting around the city. And the primary focus has been from the stretch from Harrisburg down to about Orange Street. The city of Lancaster has put in $400,000, leveraged against approximately $4.2 million overall, in order to do the design and engineering work. And this last 1.14 million, not 1.14 million from the Commonwealth Financing Authority will be focused on the implementation of the stretch from basically from Orange down to, down to Fairview. So this is primarily the stretch from Culleton Park south, utilizing existing public rights of way to be able to have a pedestrian way and a bike path that connects all the way through the north-south of the city. I think this is a tremendous bargain. It's also one of the things that puts the city of Lancaster at the forefront of pedestrian and bicycle access. And it's, as I say, with $400,000, basically, we have leveraged more than $4 million to make this particular path work. So the resolution specifically is asking for the mayor to be designated as the official to execute all documents and agreements between the city and the Commonwealth Financing Authority.
Thank you, Mr. Campbell. Are there any council comments from the public? Mr. Dastra?
So Tony Dastra, 700 block of New Holland Avenue. I wanted to make sure I verified this before I said it last week, because it seems to me that, and like I've said last week, this project, bike lanes are great. I think we need to do more for bus infrastructure. Actually, fun story, on my bus ride here today, something unusual happened, which I've never seen before. there was actually too many bikes for the bus to handle, which is good news. So increasing the amount of opportunities and options people have in transportation is great. One of the things that Red Rose Transit Authority in a study prior that I could not relocate was expressing is that people are seeking comfort, and that's a reason why they don't choose the bus, is because they're worried about their safety or just general comfort level. And it makes sense when, from personal experience, the bus stops around my house, they don't even have a bench. In fact, the trash can was removed from one recently, and I think that's because it was privately operated. But anyway, I think we should be, if Red Rose Transit Authority doesn't want to work with the city on improving infrastructure, I think the city needs to approach other governments about this, because eligible entities can be a council of governments as well as a public transportation agency. I think that we should leverage land assets as the means of upping that 30%. Because we could potentially designate small segments of whether it's the city or other municipalities that want to work with us. I have a feeling that we could find a way to leverage small pieces, plots of land in order to create new destinations that can be integrated with not just the bus system, but as somebody who is an Uber driver from time to time, I think it could be a great opportunity for rideshare and increasing public safety. Something that amazes me sometimes is how often people are willing to let some random dude like me come and pick them up at their house. Like, seriously, like, I think that it'd be very responsible of a government to start thinking of where can we create destinations that are not just only for a bus stop, but potentially just a multimodal stop at that, whether it's someone getting on their way to work, using the bus, rideshare, bike lock, just walking by. I think there's a huge opportunity for us to leverage the multimodal transportation grant, working with other governments and using land assets as the means, if possible, to pay for it. Thank you.
Thank you. Also, for what it's worth, it's the 2014 final report that they pulled that study data in. It was part of it was presented on during the Mayor's Commission to Combat Poverty is the only reason I happen to know that. So if you're still looking for it. Yep. Any other comments from the public? Anybody else on council want another go?
One comment. Someone came to the building around 7 o'clock to try to get into the building for city council, and they were not able to. So I'm not sure, is it in the front they come in, or, I mean, I came in through the side.
Yeah, typically we ask folks to come in through the side, and the door is supposed to automatically be unlocked during the period during which we think that people should be able to enter the building. Do you know if they're still there?
No.
Okay. Yeah, so I think that one goes to the automation. Can we just check to make sure one more time that they are indeed on the timing they're supposed to be on?
I can check that.
I appreciate it, Mr. Harris. Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you, Councilor Diaz. Yep. Sorry, and I think hearing none, or hearing no further, Mr. Harris.
Just to clarify, Mr. President, I might have misspoke on this. This is $1.14 million. I think I might have said 1.4.
Yeah.
Mr. Arroyo.
Aye.
Ms. Beke?
Aye.
Ms. Diaz?
Aye.
Mr. Garcia Molina?
Aye.
And President Smith-Waddell?
Aye. All right, that brings us to Administration Resolution Number 37, 2021. Mr. Harris.
A resolution of the Council of the City of Lancaster approving the adoption of an amendment to the Act 537 Official Sewage Facilities Plan for the City of Lancaster.
Motion to approve?
Second?
All right, we have a motion and a second. Ms. Geiser, Mr. Smith?
I really don't have any additional comments beyond what I offered the other night, but happy to answer any questions you might have.
Are there any council comments or questions? Okay, well, sorry to make you get up. Are there any questions or comments from the public? Hearing none, Mr. Harris.
Mr. Roya,
Aye.
Ms. Baker,
Aye.
Ms. Diaz,
Aye.
Mr. Garcia Molina,
Aye.
and President Smith-Waddell.
Aye. Thank you. That brings us to Administration Resolution Number 39, 2021. Mr. Harris.
A resolution of the Council of the City of Lancaster authorizing the submission of an application seeking funding from the U.S. Department of Justice for the FY 2021 Burn Justice Assistance Grant Program.
Motion to approve.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Councilor Garcia Molina.
Thank you, Mr. President. So this one is pretty straightforward. So what it's asking here is for the approval and application for a total of $51,894, when what that would go to is to hire a consultant to review internal affairs, also for bicycles, and to make sure that our incident-based reporting is up to par. Mayor, do you want to add anything else? So that would be it, Mr. President. That's all that I have. That's it.
Y'all, I'm sorry. I don't know what's going on with me this evening. All right. Are there any council comments from the public? Okay. Hearing none, Mr. Harris.
Mr. Roya,
Aye.
Ms. Baker,
Aye.
Ms. Diaz,
Aye.
Mr. Garcia Molina,
Aye.
and President Smith-Waddell.
Aye. That brings us to Administration Resolution Number 40. Mr. Harris.
A resolution of the Council of the City of Lancaster authorizing the proper officers of the City of Lancaster to enter into an agreement with the Central Market Trust to approve certain capital improvement projects to the Central Market.
Motion to approve.
Second.
All right. We have a motion and a second. Please, Mr. Campbell.
Yes, thank you again. This is, back in 2015, a resolution had been put in place where the City of Lancaster became responsible for the management and execution of capital work at Central Market. Central Market Foundation has its own fundraising operations and has put together the money to be able to make some major roof repairs and replacement upgrades because it is a historic building, as well as to replace two major entrance doors, also historic. They have a number which is really very reasonable given the magnitude of the work involved, and this resolution is primarily to allow for the improvements to be performed by the City of Lancaster under DPW.
Thank you, Mr. Campbell. Are there any council comments or questions?
I just have a comment, Mr. President. Just to make sure that this goes on the record, that I am currently the vice chair of the board of directors of the Central Market Trust, but I receive no financial remuneration for my service, and I have no monetary other consideration from the trust for entering into this agreement with the city, should we so vote to do that this evening.
Thank you. Any comments from the public? All right. Hearing none, Mr. Harris.
Mr. Roya,
Aye.
Ms. Baker,
Aye.
Ms. Diaz,
Aye.
Mr. Garcia Molina,
Aye.
and President Smith-Waddell.
Aye. Thank you, Mr. Campbell. I think that brings us to our last legislative item, Administration Resolution Number 41, 2021. Mr. Harris.
A resolution of the City Council of the City of Lancaster converting all permits issued under COVID-19 Outdoor Dining Ordinance, Ordinance Number 4, 2020, to licenses under and pursuant to the City of Lancaster Sidewalk Cafe Ordinance, codified at Article 2 of Chapter 240, 240.11 through 240.227 of the Code of the City of Lancaster.
Motion to approve.
Second.
All right, we have a motion and a second. Is this you again, Director Campbell?
Yes, it is. Last but certainly not least, this is perhaps, as I said last week, one of the happiest aspects of the COVID ordinances that were put in place. Back in June of 2020, we put in place the outdoor dining and subsequent to that outdoor retail ordinance so that restaurants would be able to expand their services outdoors into the public right-of-way and be able to stay open or open if necessary, if they felt they were prohibited from doing so. It turned out to be a very successful program. We had 30 different restaurant applications in all 4 quadrants of the city, as well, and in addition to that, 2 liquor control board license situations as well. Because the interest has been as positive as it has, we've elected to be able to continue that aspect of the ordinance to be able to do outdoor dining with the remainder of this year's license or permitting of those restaurants. So the intention here is for the extension of outdoor dining for those restaurants and businesses that have gotten their permit through the end of December as per the life of their permit.
Thank you, Mr. Kimball, and I think that's good news. Are there any council comments on the resolution?
Just to say, Mr. Campbell, thank you for your work on this, and I know that outdoor dining has made all parts of the city more vibrant, more exciting to be in, particularly in the summer months. Outdoor dining in January was interesting, but I did it. And I think that our business community is very appreciative of our efforts on this, so I'm excited. Thank you.
I'm certainly hoping that some will ask that it be repeated as we go into subsequent years as well, because I think it adds a lot of life to the city.
Any other council comments? Or from the public? Hearing none, Mr. Harris.
Mr. Arroyo.
Aye.
Ms. Baker.
Aye.
Ms. Diaz.
Aye.
Mr. Garcia Molina.
Aye.
And President Smith-Waddell.
Aye. All right, that concludes our legislative agenda and brings us to our second public comment period, which is open for comment about items not addressed on the agenda. As always, the duration of comments is limited to 3 minutes, and of course, begin with your name and the block of your residence. Mr. Dastra.
So, Tony Dastra, 700 block of New Holland Avenue. There's an anxiety building within me that there's going to be the acquisition of property in the city leading to more, like you guys already know, I'm not a fan of the Mosaic project, regardless of whether that building's happening or not, which it likely is. I have a massive anxiety that the library's next. I think that there are, I understand the city's not responsible, it's the county library.
Well, thank you. Hold on. Tony, please complete your comment and then we'll respond.
So I understand that the city is not responsible for the county library, but I do think that the city needs to make a move to acquire the library. I think especially like land value, prices of property is going through the roof. So if we don't act on something sooner rather than later, it could get out of control. And I don't know that the city wants, if we have a project in mind, it's more affordable to acquire a building. We need a shelter for the homeless desperately. I think it's a perfect location. I think it's a perfect location. So if the city is able to, I think that this is the conversation we should start having, is that we should acquire the library before, like, because the production facility was built in 1980, and I understand that that's not very old, but neither is 1955. So before we start dismantling the library because it's not a historical building, we need to start Lancaster's future, and I think we have a moral responsibility to people. I understand that legally it's a homeless shelter. I prefer houseless because to me, these people consider Lancaster their home, and we have to do what we can to assist them in any way possible. It's right across the street from government, and the library is going into the center of town. It seems to be like the perfect connection of places in the right location. And furthermore, riding the bus, I can say that the bus stops by there very frequently. And as I said earlier, leveraging land assets, I think there's potential for this to also go into a transit project that gets people connected to jobs. I think that the city needs to move to acquire the library, even if it means eminent domain.
So, couple of things. That's well taken, and the fate of our unhoused individuals as a part of our community is, I know, personally important to several members of council up on this dais. The Lancaster Public Library actually operates, I have just left the board, actually operates in a unique position because it is actually not county administered. It is administered by a private nonprofit trust, which is responsible for 3 branches and receives a level of municipal funding when compared to other libraries around the state and the nation that I think really ought to put the county of Lancaster to shame, frankly. And I want to thank members of council for consistently voting to support the public library with city budgetary funds. So, and I think you make a compelling proposal. However, the Lancaster Public Library building across the street here has just been acquired by I believe a trust related to St. James Episcopal Church, and so far they are relatively mum on what their planned use of the building will be, and we're hoping that they'll be open to conversation with the community about that. And then I gotta say, this is the thing about eminent domain, and I don't know how many times, and I hope Deneen isn't counting, I have suggested that we eminent domain one building or another for a purpose. The thing that we always run into with these is twofold. So it's got to be for public use or administration, and the court has to hold up the eminent domain taking of the building. And I think given a number of factors, the odds that the court would hold up the eminent domain taking of that building immediately post its sale is unlikely. And having been on the board, I'll try to come around to a more positive place, Tony, but having been on the board, I can tell you that that building is going to require millions of dollars of renovations before it can be used to safely house people in. So when you think about like low barrier shelter, what you want is, so if you took all the chairs and tables out of this room, what you would want is a space in which relatively few caseworkers, supervisors, staffers would be able to keep an eye on a relatively large number of people. The largest open space in the Lancaster Public Library, if you took the stacks out, would be the basement. It would be ideal for it. It's not fit for long-term human habitation because of consistent flooding issues that have been down there. And if we do have an influx of funds, I would hope that we would identify, and if necessary, because indeed housing is a human right and a priority for all our other freedoms and rights, eminent domain take a building with more potential and less long-term liability. And I'm done.
Okay. I still feel like the conversation is valid to have. We desperately need a shelter for the houseless population in the city. Desperately.
Yep. There, the County Redevelopment Authority, and the Housing Coalition are still working on a project to. I know that one fell through to acquire a hotel, and hey, I hear the price on the Chameleon Club just dropped. So if we, anyway, But thank you for raising that. It is an important point, and we need to prioritize this item. Mayor, please.
And I would just want, thank you. Those were all excellent points. And just to say that the process of discernment that is taking place by St. James is going to begin. It was reported in Lancaster newspapers. And the other thing that I will say is that, not to say that this is not a problem, but there are beds available every night. And I think it is important to note that there are resources available for any individual who wants to be housed overnight in the city of Lancaster.
Okay, thank you guys for your time.
I would also say, just for what it's worth, because I think that is absolutely the right direction to go in, that shelter beds actually aren't the barrier at the tail end or the business end of a rapid rehousing process. It's actually, as in every other housing related thing, it's actually stock. We probably have something like 45 beds in shelters available across the county and 10 to 15 beds available in very low barrier shelters. It is, as always, stock to move people who would be ready to move into apartments into at the end of that process that presents the greatest challenge. Are there any other public comments? Okay, I believe that moves us to the report of the mayor.
Good evening, council. Thank you. Almost 2 years ago to the day, Senators Martin, Alment, Argall, and Phillips Hill sat at this dais, along with mayors from 3 cities, Lancaster Chamber, the EDC, and the Pennsylvania Municipal League, to discuss the fiscal sustainability of cities like Lancaster. In the ensuing years, we have been hard at work to develop a common sense plan that would merit the support of the legislature to address Lancaster's fiscal sustainability. The plan, dubbed Stamp Plus, would allow cities who responsibly manage their finances, no more than 4% average growth in expenses over 5 years, access to revenue-generating tools afforded to cities in municipal bankruptcy. It would, in effect, prevent cities from entering Act 47. These efforts failed. We were unable to persuade key stakeholders in the Senate and House. Here are the 3 hard truths that have been further validated by PFM's review of the city finances in 2020, which were presented to City Council, and last week's report by the Pew Charitable Trust that I'll make sure we disseminate. First, the limits imposed by Pennsylvania state law allow the city of Lancaster only one option to increase revenues: property taxes. Second, we cannot cut our way out of a structural deficit. The city's debt and pension obligations, representing 8% and 12% of the general fund respectively, are not affected by headcount reductions. What is affected by headcount reductions is public safety. Public safety is 62% of our general fund budget. And 3, we cannot economically develop our way out of a structural deficit. Most definitely, the city benefits from continued public and private investment in our community. However, that does not translate into seismic shifts to the assessed values of properties cumulatively. What can we do? Raise property taxes. If you read the front page of the LNP yesterday, you'll see that all but 3 school districts in the county are raising property taxes despite additional federal and state increases in funding. Similarly, the city has received a once-in-a-lifetime injection of federal support through the American Rescue Plan. This has staved off catastrophe for the city, buying us some time. However, a property taxes increase is inevitable, and we will begin forecasting when and how much in the coming months. We can cut costs. The city has continued to cut costs through new procurement processes, self-performing work rather than subcontracting, refinancing existing debt, of which we discussed earlier tonight, and fundraising to offset costs and or support special initiatives. Again, a resolution before you tonight for several grants. We can also continue to advocate and invite solutions. While our efforts in the state legislature have been unsuccessful thus far, we are not giving up. The stakes are too high for the city, the county, and the region. We will begin reaching out anew in the fall as we prepare our 2022 budget and the next iteration of our 5-year forecast. In the meantime, all eyes are on the trial that is set to begin on September 9th, which addresses the failure of Pennsylvania's education funding system to support students from low-income communities like ours. If the legislature cannot seemingly produce results to equitably provide funding for mandated services, perhaps the courts can. This would indeed provide welcome relief to taxpayers, especially in cities like ours. Thank you, Council President.
Thank you, Mayor Sirachi. That brings us to the report of the President of Council. I just have a couple of quick items. First, I want to thank everyone for bearing with us as we have made the transition back to public meetings, and thank the city staff, in particular, Chief of Staff Jessica King, Amber Strazo, and Bernie Harris, who have made the ongoing participation and access of meetings, both in person and digitally, possible. It's one of the duties I take most seriously as the president of Lancaster City Council, and it would not have been, this transition, as smooth as it has been, would not have been possible without the three of you. And to look forward for news, that is for the public to look forward for news coming shortly about expanding the number of meetings which will be live streamed for digital access. And want to also thank Councilor Bakay for her help in developing recommendations about how council can move forward, as well as Councilor Garcia Molina for his emphasis on language access for council and for the city. And then I'll take a moment to express a frustration, much in line with what Mayor Sirachi expressed. There are 53 cities of the third class within the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania, which represent 1.2 million Pennsylvanians whose local governments are prevented by the legislature of the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania from passing laws on our own wages, on many tenant protections, on varying revenue sources, on giving certain classes of residents a tax break, for example. At the last tax increase, we were asked if we could do a carve out for seniors. No, illegal in the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania, or setting laws on what can and cannot be sold in our cities, even if those things are dangerous, such as fireworks. So, despite a constant conversation from our representatives and senators about small governments, they have all done their level best to prevent us and prevent you from deciding what kind of communities we want to live in. And certainly none of them are watching this right now. I'm sure that they all feel that they have better things to do, but it is unacceptable and creates an increasingly untenable environment for us to govern our cities, and an increasingly untenable environment for our residents to live in. And despite that, small cities across the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania continue to thrive in their own ways, owing to the creativity and diligence of their elected officials, staff, and residents. So I just wanted to take this moment, since I get to do this, to say that I am sick of it and deeply resent the lack of faith that the legislature of the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania has in local elected officials, whom I believe work the hardest. That concludes my report, which brings us to council comments. Councilors?
President?
Councilor Diaz.
Okay, so just to let you know, there must have been a group of people that came to the building, and they were trying to report that there was a shooting around 5:30 around, I think it was Green Street. If I'm not okay. So I'm not sure why they were not able to access, but we need to make sure that they do. So they will be able to, to attend city council.
Indeed, Counselor, thank you. Any other council comments? Okay, hearing none, I will entertain a motion to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn?
Second.
We have a motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
We are